Thanks for coming, guys. So I'm just going to introduce our two speakers. So Carolyn Minchin is a social work student at Sturt University with a background in teaching and counselling. Carolyn's been working on developing programs for teacher wellbeing through dialogue with Indigenous practice wisdom and third wave behavioural science. Ken Zulumovski is a gifted coach in the trauma-sensitive therapeutic space. Ken's putting mindfulness and Indigenous perspectives on the map and into clinical, education and safer, culturally intelligent workplaces. Ken's company delivers specialist intervention programs, coaching and wellbeing development initiatives. Please welcome me in saying hello to our two speakers. And I also have two gifts for them. So you each get one of these.
Is this going to work? Yep, it's working. Cool. Okay. All right. So, we're grateful and honoured to have this opportunity to present our work. This has been an in-kind research project that's been going on since 2013, since the World Conference for Association for Contextual Behavioural Science was in Sydney, and we saw the need to start a dialogue between the international evidence-based practices in mindfulness and Indigenous practice wisdom, and incredibly grateful that Ken Zulumovski stepped up to the mark and put a lot of his own time into this project, and I believe that we're really creating some new ways of thinking and working within this space and within a social emotional wellbeing framework as a ground of being for this project. So, put it over to you.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to pay respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge all of you and elders past and present. And also, just to let you know that some of what we'll be sharing with you is part of a story about an organic community response to the need for further treatments for borderline personality and related mental illness. So you'll see a bit of an example of, you'll see a hero clip, a 4-minute hero clip of a grassroots community initiative called Gamarada, Indigenous Healing and Life Training.
Gamarada meaning friends with a purpose, so we're very much focused on peer support, encouragement, and Ken works using the courage coaching model, so standing for culture, optimism, understanding, relationships, acceptance, gratitude and encouragement. And I'd like to start with a disclaimer too. I don't claim to know anything about Indigenous culture. I come from an English-Irish background. This is very much a two-way learning project where we're building a bridge and new ways of conceptualising come into being as we go. So you'll be experiencing that towards the end. We'll be doing an experiential piece as well, where Ken will be taking you through a Tadiri deep listening practice, which is based on the work of Miriam Borman, who's an elder from Daly River. So this is the guide for us for our reflective practice. And Ken's work's also very much informed by his training with Judy Atkinson, who's one of our national living treasures on trauma recovery and expert on intergenerational trauma. So, next slide. Oh. Oops. So this is, so what I bring to this project is my training in behavioural science and work with Marsha Linehan, and this is a picture here of Miriam, Auntie Miriam, from Daly River. So it's the bringing together, even though these elders haven't been able to meet in person, through our work and our dialogue, we're bringing together as equals, looking at the work and the depth of the importance of the Indigenous practice wisdom, and particularly how it fits within the DBT framework, particularly around concepts around wise mind. Next slide.
Just to emphasise that what I've been able to do with the work with the support of Carolyn is we've been able to bring Indigenous therapeutic methods and methodologies together with the mainstream, psychotherapy methods and methodologies. So you've got the two sciences coming together. One is validating the other, and the other is validating one. I think a lot of what's happening in modern therapy these days is there's a leaning towards the wisdom traditions, the mindfulness and in this country now the Dadiri. So that's probably one of the most exciting things about this project is the two sort of sciences coming together and a validation of what Indigenous communities have been doing within men's groups and women's groups and healing circles and yarning circles for a long, long time. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I might just take this one. So, Dadiri, has anybody ever heard of it? Never heard of it before? Hands up if you have. No? Good. This is a gift. This is what you're going to take away something special today. Dadiri, so it can translate to a quiet stillness, listening with more than the ears, inner contemplation to inform action at a later time. So it's about going in. Auntie Miriam Rose talks about getting connected to the deep spring that's inside of us all. It's about deep calling to deep. So it's possibly it's even going into the subconscious, trans meditative type practice that's really effective in quietening down the busyness of the mind, quietening the anxiety, slowing down the cognition, which allows some learning to take place. Because we know that if our clients are too busy being anxious, if their cognition is impaired, then they can't really learn, they can't really take in much of what we've got to share with them. So Dadiri gives us another tool that we can use, that we can practice, very similar to mindfulness. And just for your information, just this year we presented at the National Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference in Alice Springs, and I took the trouble to drive a further 210 kilometres south to the Daly River. Has anybody ever experienced? Is it north?
North of
yes, south of Darwin. I flew to Darwin and drove south, and I was invited to go to the community where Auntie lives, and she's so when we talk about her, the right way to really reference her is artist, former school principal, community elder, because she wears all those badges.
Soon to be author.
Soon to be author, yeah.
Yeah, in the process of writing a book.
And so we'll all live long enough in this country to experience the immersion of Dadiri as we did with mindfulness some 15 or so years ago. Yeah. For those of you who remember when it came in, before it was in. Next.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone need an introduction to DBT, or are people all familiar with it? Would you like a rundown or not? Because I'll assume that you've got a handle on. No, yeah. Okay. So a modular treatment developed by Marsha Linehan as an empirical-based treatment. She was one of the first people who went out and worked with people at very high risk, and it was a very flexible approach to research. It was very coalface and quite groundbreaking in its time. The 4 modules that it's based on are mindfulness, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, and I always forget the one that I need to learn the most. Interpersonal effectiveness. It'll come. Thank you, emotion regulation. There you go. It's the anxiety. It's blocking the thought process. Not as much access to the frontal cortex. Yeah, so we'll flip forward and we'll show you. We're doing some work on just slightly modifying the worksheets, basically using the worksheets and adding the word Dadiri in there, and we're going to be hopefully negotiating this also and talking about this with Marsha when she's in Sydney next year to get her approval. So what we're really doing is embedding DBT as a treatment or as a supervision model for supervision, for peer supervision, within the social and emotional wellbeing framework. So I'll just give you a quick definition of the social and emotional wellbeing framework. This is taken from the book Working Together, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Mental Health and Wellbeing Principles and Practice. It's a government publication. There are 2 of these out and they're freely accessible, and I thoroughly recommend people to get hold of these and develop an understanding of the material in these. It's very, very rich, and it's a fantastic framework to be working under.
Not just for Indigenous Australians, so please keep your minds open when we talk about Indigenous Australians. Don't kind of turn off and go, well, I may not see many Indigenous clients, or I'm not really a specialist, and I'm not working at Aboriginal Medical Service, or I'm not working in Indigenous communities, because this stuff, you know, is very transferable to the mainstream, because we're all human beings, we all suffer the same kind of, you know, issues. So in an actual fact, I dare to say that in some instances, Indigenous Australians are actually leading some areas of mental health and social emotional well-being and community empowerment, because they've had to in order to survive. So it makes sense to actually look to, you know, the Indigenous experience to see how, you know, Indigenous populations have developed resilience, and how they've managed to, you know, to repair their families and to repair their communities, you know, after experiencing, you know, huge devastation, colonial experience.
Yeah, and when we're talking in the community to live personal experience of that, and I think Judy Atkinson's done us an incredible service. So at the opening of the trauma centre in Canberra, she talked about the trauma that Indigenous people are in recovery from, and also immigrant and also invader trauma. And in working with Ken and going to experience Didiri in the group in Redfern, I've been able to unpack some of that invader trauma myself, and it's there. It's hard to see when you're in it, and it's incredibly enriching experience to be able to acknowledge that and face that as equals, as colleagues, to overcome some of those boundaries that we have set in place if we are caught up within that colonial framework, which certainly I was educated within. So the social and emotional wellbeing frameworks come to us particularly from a group of Indigenous psychologists, Pat Dudgeon, Schultz, Hart and Kelly, 2003. There's a circle diagram, connection to body. Sorry. Do you want to read this out actually? Around here? I'll get Ken to do this bit. So, connection, yeah.
So I apologise we haven't got it up on the screen, but it's handy to know. So it begins with connection to body, and it's a continuum, a circle. So the next is connection to mind and emotions, then connection to family and kinship, then connection to community, and then extends connection to culture, and connection to country, then connection to spirituality and ancestors.
And I think that's the extraordinary thing about learning mindfulness from an Indigenous perspective. I've done, actually probably on the next slide, a little comparison of acceptance and commitment therapy and DBT and Didiri, and I mean I love all those ways of working. Didiri is the only one that really takes us into grief and loss, and that real embodied connection of the cycle of life. The other models are great, but they kind of, yeah, there's a depth to this work that I haven't experienced anywhere else. So this is Marsha's Wise Mind, States of Mind, Mindfulness Handout 3. So this is the standard definition so reasonable mind, emotion mind, and wise mind is the state that we're aiming for in the middle, where there's an intersection between reason and emotion. And this is the way this is perceived cognitively. So we're bringing together the left and the right brain, seeing the value of both reason and emotion, the wisdom within each person. We're walking the middle path. This, I would say, is one of the key skills that I draw on in both personally and professionally in crisis management. If I can access wise mind, then generally things tend to go a lot better for myself and the other people in the situation. So what we've done here is just to think about, well, Didiri meaning deep listening. If we think about that in this middle place, it's not an exact translation, but I think this is getting at where the work that groups like Gamarada is so valuable. They've got a really established deep practice in this, and it drops right into the treatment. And this is the place where we've identified that it's really useful to think about this as a place where these ways of working can come together. And at the ATSIS PEP conference, the Suicide Prevention Evaluation Conference in Alice Springs, we talked about Didiri heart-mind-body context. That's the kind of place that this work really sits. Do you want to speak to that?
Towards the end, we'll have an experiential activity where you guys can actually experience the Dadadi. And then perhaps when you reflect on this, you'll have more of an understanding to be able to perhaps appreciate how it works.
Yeah. Okay, so this just talks a little bit more about the program for wellbeing for teachers that we're in the process of developing at the moment and putting through the Board of Studies accreditation process. And we're focusing particularly on classroom safety and looking at how this work can be applied in the classroom to really work with kids and staff and community in a trauma-informed way. To really give people permission, I think, to think about the safety that lies in that present moment practice. And also the learning that comes from looking to Indigenous wisdom as a guide. So that particularly comes into Standard 7 and community engagement. And also looking at the importance for students and how they learn, which is Teaching Standard 1. So acknowledging that we need to feel safe to learn. We need to be in a place where we can manage our own internal process and value both sides of human experience, or value that middle place between reason and emotion. And I just think the value of the work that Miriam, Judy Atkinson and that Ken and the group in Redfern are doing is it's quite a rich, incredibly rich source of, have to be patient with this kind of work. It's, I think, we're just very blessed to have this in a busy city like Sydney, to have this source of peace right in the heart of the city. It's quite amazing.
I'll tell you, what's amazing about it is that it's actually been going for almost 10 years now. So it's actually the longest continual running Indigenous healing and life skills program in the country. And it operates completely autonomously with no funding and no dependence on government support or anything, because it's based on a train-the-trainer principle. It's skills sharing with participants, and it's leadership, teaching and coaching. So, participants who have capacity are able to come in, and the way the group functions is everybody plays a part and plays a role. That speaks to sustainability, because that's a big problem with a lot of programs in the social emotional wellbeing space.
Yeah, that's something that Dr. Tom Karma certainly acknowledged at the mental health conference last year that one of the biggest problems for the Indigenous community is the inconsistency of government. I think working within these frameworks, for me, I've had an incredible opportunity to have real consistency in my learning for the last 3 years, and that's been quite a gift that couldn't have got from university or from any of the agencies where I've been working. Do you want to flick to the...
So, we thought rather than try and explain what this looks like, or we can explain, maybe you can talk to that while I'm... Actually, you won't, because I'll be flicking out of the screen.
Get the clip up, I think.
But, you know, this is what some of the principles of this community grassroots initiative, mental health initiative. And rather than just look at it on PowerPoint, we thought we might just share this clip with you, depending on how fast the internet has been able to download it, which is really, really slow here. You might get the first 40 seconds of it and then it might stop. But so when I'm using this resource, which was developed just last year...
Do you want to hold the... Can people hear?
Can you hear me? When we developed this resource last year, which was developed from our documentary, which was made in 2009, and some new footage. We've been using it in universities and in the education sort of area around cross-cultural communications and cultural safety stuff, changing workplace cultures, working around safety and self-care stuff. So when we play this stuff, we ask people to look at it from a few different perspectives. So when you're looking at it from a community engagement perspective. What was the recipe for community engagement? How has it been successful? What can I do in my workplace, in my work practice to engage clients better or communities? Obviously, an example of it's a rare example of a Indigenous community initiative, which most of you probably won't ever have the opportunity to. Well, you've all got the opportunity if you live around here, because you can come down and pop in any time. But most people won't go there. So it gives you a bit of a rare window, an experiential opportunity to have a look at what happens and what it might look like and who's involved. So it gives you that experience, and also understanding Indigenous concepts of healing. What is healing? I like to use the definition from the 2008 Social Justice Report, which is Indigenous healing it's about therapeutic change and cultural renewal. So you can see those two components pretty consistent in a lot of Indigenous healing programs. The cultural stuff is it's about identity and place and purpose, rebuilding, restoration, reconstruction, and of communities and families and selves. So there's three perspectives that you might take looking at it. We are in Sydney, where the First Nations people speak the Gadigal language. And in this language, Gamarada means friends or comrades with a common purpose. Using Indigenous healing techniques, a growing number of Aboriginal men, women, youth and children are reconnecting to their culture in a community-led effort to closing the gap.
In November 2007, a group of us brothers decided it was time to come together and create the framework for a cultural healing program for men in Redfern. With a focus in guiding young men in the community, the program allows men to confront their anger, addictions, and loss of culture in a structured and safe environment.
The government provides vital services in health, housing, education, aged care, and family support.
And education, health and housing. We might just leave that there. It might load up. It looks like it's stopped. I don't know what's happening with the IT guy. If he comes back, we might get a look at it. But we'll continue with this PowerPoint, and maybe at the end it might have loaded for us.
Just wanted to speak a bit too about the differences in language and conceptualization, because one of the things we struggled with was the term borderline personality disorder isn't really one that's used in the Indigenous communities. It's not conceptualised that way. Intergenerational trauma is much more the way that it's conceptualised. But when I did an analysis of the services and the treatments, what really struck me was that it doesn't really matter what the diagnosis is. If someone's in and out of hospital with self-harm, DBT is the treatment of choice. It was designed for people at high risk, and then it was applied and works really well for BPD. And I think that the real power about Gamarada is that it's an inclusive community framework. So having those really deep, that deep capacity to manage intense emotion from a non-reactive stance is really one of the key things that underpins the way that the program was set up. So non-reaction and deep listening, am I right? With the underpinnings 10 years ago, this program. And I would say those are things that are really crucial and also form the underpinnings of dialectical behavior therapy. And they're really crucial whether someone's self-harming out of complex trauma or BPD or a mixture of them. I think it's incredibly important that we allow ourselves some flexibility and some imagination to get around the language and to really think about what works. And I mean, the facts are that to have an open group that's community sustained, that people can come back to after different periods, and for myself as well, I've seen my goals change and develop over 3 years. I participate in the group when I go, the same as anyone else. We follow a protocol where we introduce ourselves. We give the reason why we've come to the group. We hold ourselves accountable to the group because we name a goal or a valued direction to the others that can be like a touchstone to come back to at a later date. I've set myself some goals for around self-care and wellbeing that have been incredibly helpful. And I know a lot of the other clinicians who come to the group certainly work on those things when they're there. It's an incredibly valuable perspective because the learning circle is deeply democratic, holds people accountable at a community level, and really allows people to voice what works. And I think that's been the powerful thing for me, is to see people's lives changing over the 3 years that I've been coming to Gamarada. And to see those skills developing and that capacity to manage intense emotion. And those are the things, the underpinnings of DBT as well. It's the dialectic between acceptance and change. And that's something that's very, very present in the Indigenous practice wisdom as I've experienced it in Redfern. So I guess what I'm saying is that this is a group that has massive capacity to manage people with BPD, and it's not a group that's going to sit around and diagnose either or worry about what the diagnosis is. It's a very practical, grassroots approach. Are we?
What you're looking at on the stage, on the screen there, is something that we took to the national, the first Indigenous Suicide Prevention Conference this year. And so that conference was obviously quite heavy. A lot of communities sent representatives of families and services along to try and, to bring back some resources and some skills and some capacity to deal with what was happening in those communities. And that the issue of suicide in Indigenous communities it's extremely sensitive, and it's a national problem that needs addressing. Anyway, we thought we would be a little bit different, and we thought we would be a bit more interactive than listening to all this stuff around suicide prevention, which was quite heavy. And we thought we'd get the audience up in a participatory activity and singing to this old song. by the, was it Warumpi?
Warumpi Band.
Warumpi Band, yeah.
Yeah, and partly because Marsha sang in this auditorium back in March with 600 clinicians here. She got us all singing. I think it was the Hallelujah Chorus, actually, or something similar. But so my idea was to bounce that off Ken and think about what he would think would be appropriate to sing in Alice Springs, where people are facing such an incredible epidemic and such a crisis. So this was his response to Marsha's.
And I'm not, you know, I mean, I think I listened to this song as a kid, you know, many years ago. But when I looked back and I read the lyrics and actually, you know, YouTube the song, I thought, this is actually a profound statement, you know, about social justice and about community cohesion and about resilience and about, it's all tied into social emotional wellbeing and mental health, right? And so I thought, what better song to have everybody up and singing and clapping and Carolyn's leading the way in this. I'm not usually one to get up and sing and clap. I hope that I'm not getting up and singing and clapping if you're in any of my seminars. But we're not going to get you up singing and clapping. I know that's what you're thinking. You're thinking, is he going to ask?
If you come to Redfern, you may
hope he's not going to ask.
this.
Anything but ask. Yeah, profound statement, you know, coming from lived experience in those communities who've done it really, really hard. And it speaks to the national unity about everybody, which means, you know, if society's, what does it say? It doesn't matter what you...
Doesn't matter if the ship is sinking.
That's the one I love.
Yeah.
Where's that? Is it there?
Doesn't matter what your name is, we've got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're going to save it. And yeah, there's a line in the actual song about.
Is it not missing?
I think it's missing from off that one.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. It doesn't matter which religion or something. It's all the same when the ship is sinking, and that just helps me put things in perspective when, you know.
In terms of the theoretical content there, participatory mindfulness is what Marsha talks about. The way she views mindfulness is the important thing is the how skills and the what skills. So it's about being effective. The what skills are observe, describe, participate. The how skills one mindfully, non-judgmentally, effectively. So this can be an incredible activity to do, whether it's with colleagues or with clients or in a group, just to get people out of themselves and get up and singing. And,
or just sit and sing, or mime. Do we need to look at this?
So the methodology that we're using as well is linking this to journaling practice in social work. It's a community group now.
Let me clarify that. Since 2012, after attending a conference somewhere, an Indigenous health conference, what was happening was the national trend was, because of the need, because of the unmet need and the demand, men's groups that have been very, very well established all around the country for a long, long time were opening up their doors to allow women to attend and to gain and to benefit from, you know, the social emotional wellbeing support that was happening in those circles. And what happened was there was an issue around women's business and men's business, and of course the decision was made that if ever a subject came up which pertained to women's business or men's business, that it would just be discussed in an appropriate space and time, as not to deny women who were seeking, you know, the social emotional wellbeing support that was available in these groups. Because in a lot of country towns and, you know, places, there were established men's groups, but there was a lot of services, as there usually is for women's, you know, women's refuges and, you know, women's services. But people were looking for something a little bit different, a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more community orientated, something that was available after hours, that didn't have a whole bunch of red tape or access issues, perhaps. So since 2012, it's been open to community. It was initially focused on men and youth. So half its life almost has been focusing on community. Yeah. Okay. Well, we just know. I mean, anything, you know, that's sensitive nature around, it's sort of private and sensitive. People will indicate, you know, let sort of the group kind of govern itself. So if anybody has an issue, it's a process of constantly asking for permission and checking in and you know, making sure everybody's engaged and comfortable with it. I think that's one of the fundamental values of the group, is that it's facilitated in that way, and ownership is very much placed on the participants and not just one or two or three leaders. Although at any given night there's usually one or to two or three professionals in the room, like a psychiatrist, counsellor, mental health professional.
The group's got quite a strong structure, I think, that's naturally balanced between acceptance and change through the Didiri practice and the goal setting. So that's something that keeps it within a safe structure, so that people won't re-traumatise each other. That's very well managed in the group. So if someone needs extra support, that's given, but it's not the kind of group where people would go and go over old traumas in a way that's going to be damaging.
Definitely one of the differences in that particular program. It's very much strengths focused, and it's facilitated in a way that's, you know, it's focused on strength, it's focused on positivity. Sometimes very challenging to do when you've got, you know, Indigenous people who have stories about, you know, triggering stories, whatever it might be, related to family or community or, you know, incarceration or policing or whatever. But we just use some skillful facilitation to move them out of that space into a more proactive, you know, perception and attitude about what can I do, you know, productively about this. You know, being sort of, instead of being reactive to things, being proactive, actually doing it, and that ties into the pro-social stuff, isn't it? What are my values? Yep. What am I prepared to do about it? What do I value, and what action am I going to use?
Yeah, that and the mindfulness, the allowing space and a moment to breathe, and coming back to the Didiri practice. So would that be a good place to lead into that at this point?
We've got 20 minutes, is it? 5 past 3?
Oh,
Guys?
10 to 5 to 3?
5 to 3? How long do we have, do you know? 3 o'clock? Oh, does it? So we've got like
5 to
10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes?
Okay. Yeah, while we do that, can I get the IT guy, is that possible to fix the internet? Sorry, I'm not using the microphone, am I? He's going to have a go. All right. Are there any other slides you need to talk about?
You can. So this is where I've done a breakdown, and this is based on so acceptance and commitment therapy, comparing to DBT, comparing to Didiri skills, and this is based on Miriam Rose Angamabwoman's definition. So the things that we focus on in Didiri practice: being present, listening, connection to country, understanding seasonal change. That was a new practice for me. I found that quite strong, especially.
She can speak to it.
Yeah.
Off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, seasonal change. I found that's been really good for well-being, actually, just to get out in the weather. And that matches really well to tip skills in DBT, which is one of the strongest skills I think there is for helping someone who's self-harming from a first aid perspective. Temperature, tip skills standing for temperature can sometimes be just applying ice or getting out in the cold. So it can be a way to get someone out of their mind and into their body. Can be a really useful first aid response to self-harm. Temperature and muscle relaxation.
She's quite good.
I can usually reel it off.
She's a wealth of knowledge and skills. She's very, very good. And she's brave. She's very brave. She's got guts, and guts is enough.
I totally recommend you Google tip skills under DBT. There's lots of worksheets that come up on the internet on that, and I think it's an absolutely crucial first aid skill for anyone caring for someone who's self-harming.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes. So we mentioned that we would take you through an experiential practice of Didiri. So I want you all to kind of just prepare yourselves right now for a moment of quiet stillness. So just place out of your hands, just get the things out of your hands, put them to the side. Does anybody know what the definition of posture is? If you look in the dictionary, it says attitude of the body. I looked that up the other day. I thought, oh, that's kind of fitting for Didiri. So if everybody sits up straight in their chairs in a nice straight posture, so you're going to assume an attitude of the body of attentiveness and focus. Of course, you already had that. It's just a minor adjustment, right? So if you feel safe enough, just close the eyes. Just begin your focus now on the breath. So breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Breathing into a count of 8. And while you're breathing, perhaps just visualize the Northern Territory landscape, maybe the red dust, the grass blowing in the winds, maybe the dry riverbeds, goannas and kangaroos, maybe a sunset or an early morning sunrise. Visualize the sound of the ancient cultural corroboree, the singing, the clapsticks, maybe the sound of the fire, the crackling of the fire. And just take this moment to offer gratitude to our Auntie Miriam Ungamer Rose for this beautiful gift of Didiri to be shared with all Australians. And while you're in your Didiri moment, thinking about the definition, thinking about quiet stillness, inner contemplation, listening with more than the ears. To inform action at a later date. Didiri refers to a deep spring inside each of us, a connection to spirit. Remain focused on the breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Feeling a sense of gratitude, a sense of peace, a sense of serenity, a sense of connectedness. Connection to land, connection to kinship, a collegial connection, a feeling of safety, a feeling of support, a feeling of strength, of love, a dedication to helping our fellow mankind. And just now, while with the eyes closed, just bringing the hands together now at the level of the chest. We're going to visualize making fire in a traditional way, rubbing the hands together, rubbing the sticks together to create heat and friction. I want to hear some hands being rubbed together with friction. So we're visualizing now the sticks being rubbed together. We're visualizing heat being produced. Now we're visualizing the smoke, and soon there's going to be the ignition of the fire, and now blowing onto that fire, onto those embers to make the fire, taking the hands up, placing them over the face, breathing in that fire energy, connecting and paying respect to the fire, and connecting the fire energy to the personal attributes that we have of willpower, discipline, patience, control, self-control, leadership. And with the hands over the face, in your own time, just gently open up the eyes, return back into the room.
Actually, interesting having the ambulance on screen, because I've remembered what TIP skills stand for. So it's temperature, which can be just applying ice or a cold shower, or intense exercise, paced breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. So they're my key first aid skills in DBT. So back to the screen.
Told you she was good, didn't I?
As long as I practice mindfulness. Otherwise it all goes out the window.
Running on time or after time? Behind time? Anyway, it's 5 to 3. There's a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has any questions to ask. This PowerPoint will be available from the conference organisers for you. It's got all our contact details there. Feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Come and have a yarn with us later on if you like. Thanks for your attention. Hope we've been of some use to you. Good luck with your endeavours.